Hey guys, hope you're all having a fantastic day and welcome to my first Q&A for 2019. I want to kind of do these a little bit more regularly this year because I get thousands upon thousands of questions pretty much every week and it's really hard for me to kind of answer all of them. So if I can answer maybe 5 or 10 questions per video, I think it would be a really good thing. And I recently asked you guys on my community page if you have any questions, and I got hundreds of questions. So I'll try and get through some today. We've got some really good questions. Now, before we jump into this video, I quickly want to say a big thanks to my friends over at Storyblocks for supporting my channel and sponsoring this video. And if you haven't heard about Storyblocks, I'd definitely take some time to check them out. Essentially, over at Storyblocks, you can get some pretty high quality stock video footage, some in 4K, audio and photos that you can use for your work. So for example, one way in which you could use this is to get some footage for your travel videos. I know sometimes it's almost impossible to get that perfect drone shot, for example, where you don't have permission to fly or you don't have your drone with you. Well, with Storyblocks, you can find the pro footage that someone else has shot and you can fit it into your videos perfectly. It's great for things like that. They've also got things like After Effects templates for titles and transitions, which are pretty sweet too. Importantly though, all of the footage is royalty free, which means you can use it in your own videos with no problems. So if you want to check out Storyblocks, I'll put a link in the description box below. Go and support them because they're supporting our channel and that's really cool. And find yourself some cool footage. But anyway, let's now jump into the Q&A. So the first question said, "Hey Chris, what was the first camera you ever got and what age did you get? When did you start photography?" That's a really good question. I think I got my very first camera, my first DSLR, when I was around about 13 years of age. It was a Sony, I'm not even sure, Sony A100 or something like that. It was before all of these, you know, A6500 and all those kind of have come out. And it was really, really cool. I remember a friend of my dad's, he was a French guy and he came over to Australia and he had a DSLR, and I remember he let me use it one day, and I was taking some photos of some flowers and I could see the difference that a DSLR could really do compared to back then. We had like, you know, just normal cameras. And you could really get a nice like shallow depth of field, you could separate your subject, and the image quality really was just fantastic. So I was really hooked ever since then. After that, I probably took a little bit of a break in buying cameras, and I remember I was actually studying in Sweden, which is funnily enough where I live now. I was probably around about 20 years old, and then I bought a Canon 550D, or I think it was called a Canon T2i. It was a really big camera because it was one of these first cameras that had you know, full HD video in a DSLR, and it was really fantastic. It had terrible autofocus. In fact, it didn't even really autofocus in video. It didn't have a microphone jack or anything like that, but it really got me into the world of DSLRs, and it really, I think a lot of people got into the world, you know, with the Rebel series cameras or the, you know, the Canon 5D Mark II. They really introduced people to these larger sensor cameras, and ever since then we've been using them, and I'm still using them right now, and I think a lot of you guys are as well. So if you're coming into the world of photography now and you're seeing you know, there's all these different cameras with large sensors and interchangeable lenses, just remember a long time ago they were really expensive and they didn't have all the features that we have now, so we're very lucky. So Stephen says, "Hey Chris, I've been watching a lot of your 80D videos and want to know what would you like to see in a Canon 90D? What would be your favorite specs for that?" Well, yeah, I'm really excited about the Canon 90D. I'm still not sure when it's coming out. Canon is often a little bit slow with this, but I would definitely like to see 4K. I think that's going to be critical for Canon, and if they don't, I think they're going to be missing out majorly. So they will need to put 4K in. Obviously, I would also like to see no crop on that 90D 4K. I don't think that's going to happen. I think that there will be a crop, and it's probably going to be a significant crop. Otherwise, Canon will have a really fantastic camera. The other things that I really like to see are things like good autofocus, and I think that's been one of the problems why I haven't been going to something like Panasonic with their Panasonic GH5. I think that's a fantastic camera. It's got pretty much everything I want, but it doesn't have stable autofocus like I'm getting with the Canon. So you can see right now, I'm using a Canon 70D, which is about, you know, 5 years old, but I still have really good autofocus, even if I move back and forward, and it's kind of getting pretty dim here in Sweden. So I would love to see great autofocus in the 90D. I'd love to see 4K. Obviously, I think it's time. I still don't shoot in 4K, but I know a lot of people do. I would love to see the headphone jack still there, the microphone jack still there. Doesn't need to be a big change in the body. I think that's a really nice kind of medium size. It's in between, you know, a Rebel series camera like an SL2 or a T6 or something like that. But it's also not too big like a Canon 5D Mark IV or a Canon 6D Mark II. Obviously, they're full frame cameras, but yeah, I would like to see it kind of stay the same, but I think a lot of people really are kind of waiting for that kind of, 4K, good autofocus, and if it does, with the color science that Canon has, I think that'll be a great camera. That'll be the big, hopefully, winner for Canon. Jason Brown says, what are the best vintage lenses or kits online? Well, in terms of vintage lenses, I would definitely take a look at any of the old Nikon lenses. They're fantastic. Even if you are using different camera brands, you can still generally get adapters for them. So that's definitely what I'll be taking a look at. So Medley M says, what's up, Chris? I got a Canon SL2 as my very first DSLR. That's awesome as a first DSLR. What do you think about the camera, and which lenses would you recommend for video? Well, like I said, the Canon SL2 is fantastic. I think if you've watched my videos, you would know that I really am a big fan of that camera, and it's probably the one that I'm going to recommend for most people, especially if you are leaning towards video as well as photography. In terms of lenses for video, you will want to try and stick with STM lenses, which are Canon's kind of video-centric lenses. They've got a stepper motor, which means that they're going to have silent autofocus, well, essentially silent autofocus, and they're going to have really fast autofocus, especially if you pair it up with the dual pixel autofocus, which the Canon SL2 has. Now, some other cameras like the Canon T6 or Canon T7, they don't have dual pixel autofocus, so it's not really going to make a big difference if you get a STM lens. But if you do have dual pixel autofocus like in the SL2 or the 77D or the 80D or the 70D, which I'm using right now, it really does make a big difference. And you're going to be getting some really nice, smooth cinematic autofocus, so it's something I would recommend. A couple of lenses, if you want to be doing vlogging, I'm always going to be recommending the Canon 10 to 18mm STM lens. It's a fantastic lens, super lightweight, super wide, great autofocus, and it's really quiet. I'd also recommend the Nifty 50, especially for photography. You can get a really nice shallow depth of field with that lens. It really is super nice. Not great for video because it's quite a long lens, but it can work as well. And I'd also recommend something, maybe a travel lens like the 18 to 135 STM. Really nice lens as well. I use that one quite a lot when I'm traveling, so that's definitely something I'd take a look at. So Addy P is writing, what photo editing software do you recommend? Well, Addy, pretty much anything to get your hands onto is going to work really well for you. So let's say you're on a Mac, even if you use something like Preview, you can really just start changing colors. You can start looking at your highlights and your white levels and your black levels and things like that. You can adjust saturation and contrast. And once you start to learn that, it's really, really good to kind of get your eye into photography editing. For me currently, I use a mixture of two programs. I use Photoshop and I use Lightroom. Now, if I'm going to be doing any kind of layering or I'm going to be doing some really detailed work on the actual photo, I'm always going to be using Photoshop because I find that I'm very comfortable with it. I've been using Photoshop for probably close to 15 years and I really do like it. In terms of using things like presets though, I think that Lightroom is fantastic for colors. So if you want to be really, making your photo pop, you want to be getting some really nice colors, there's nothing better than Lightroom as well. And especially if you want to manage and organize your photos, I'd definitely take a look at something like Lightroom because they've got fantastic cataloging on Lightroom. It can be a little bit expensive. Funnily enough, you guys might not believe it, but I'm actually still using Lightroom 4. And I use Photoshop CS6, which means I don't actually have to pay for the Creative Cloud because I kind of think it's a bit of a con. It's very, very expensive. I don't know about you guys, but yeah, it's pretty expensive for me. So I'm quite happy having my kind of maybe, how old would that be now? 5-year-old version. Still works really well, but I don't have to pay any monthly fees, so it's good for me. But I'd definitely take a look at Photoshop, even if you can just get a trial of Photoshop. It's really great. Start to learn how to use layers, start to learn how to, cut out different objects, do masking and things like that. It's pretty easy once you get the hang of it. But yeah, definitely Photoshop, Lightroom, they're the two big ones for me. Seaborg Productions says, do you prefer photography or videography? That's a really good question. And I'm a bit mixed on that. I love taking photos. I love documenting my life, and I think that's what a lot of us like to do. We really like documenting our lives and all the moments in it so we can look back on it later on. These days I don't take as many photos as maybe I would have a few years ago. I'm obviously taking a lot of video because I'm making these videos, so I guess you could call it videography in a way, but generally it's just me sitting in front of a camera, so I'm not doing a massive amount of video. And in terms of short films and things like that, I don't do that as much as I used to do as well. And there's nothing really wrong about that. I think you go through kind of ebbs and flows with your photography and your cinematography. because you kind of do different things. You know, you might have a full-time job, so you might not be able to get out and take photos, but when you do, you really, really enjoy it. And I think we all go through these kind of, you know, peaks and troughs, and you know, as long as you still enjoy it when you pick up a camera, I think that's probably the best thing. But honestly, I'm always taking photos. I love to capture my life, and I love to capture those around, and I really do love making videos. I love doing YouTube. I think if you guys haven't done YouTube, it's definitely something to have a go at, because I mean, I've been doing this full time pretty much for around about, what, 5 years now, and it's definitely something that I really do love. I've been able to make a career out of it as well, so I'm never going to be kind of complaining about it. So I like a bit of both, but yeah, there you go. So Hockrail2 has said, how do you come up with your video concepts, and what do you think is the best setup for a beginner photographer? I do a lot of research. I'm often, you know, looking at past videos that people have done or that I've done that have worked, and then I'm just like, well, I'm going to replicate it because it's obviously working. So for example, let's say I have my Canon 90D videos, which I made a few years ago. They were really popular, would have got millions of views altogether. And I figured, well, you know, if people are interested in, you know, a Canon 80D video test, well, when the Canon SL2 comes out, I'm guessing they're probably going to be interested in a video test for the Canon SL2, because we're all photography lovers. We all want to, you know, buy something that's really good, so we want to test it out. So essentially that's what I do. I will often make similar videos for each of the different cameras, and I'll also just like kind of look through past videos that other people have made and seen, well, there are a lot of people who are really interested in this. Has someone made this for this next camera? Well, if they haven't, well, I'm going to be there to try and help them and share that knowledge as well. So I got a question from Base Canon who says, do you love gaming? Well, yeah, absolutely, I really do. I actually game on a PS4. I like to play things like FIFA. I like to play NBA 2K, you know, 19. I also really have been enjoying GTA lately, GTA 5. I can play that for hours on end, and it's really quite fun. I'm not sure what my girlfriend thinks about it, but it's yeah, it's pretty fun to play PlayStation. Camden says, what's the best vlogging camera under $200? Oh, that's going to be really pushing it in terms of the price. Hopefully you can pick up something maybe second hand. I'd probably look at something like a used Canon G7X, not the new version, not the G7X Mark II. Sorry, my phone's going off. The old G7X, and I think that's going to be probably your best bet to get it around that price. You could also look into something like the PowerShot S120, I think. It's an older camera as well, and it doesn't have a flip-out screen, but it does use, it does have pretty good video quality, and it's got good audio quality as well, which is really quite important. So generally, the only way you're going to be able to get a good quality vlogging camera that's going to work is by getting it secondhand. Now, I will make one caveat for that. You can use your phone, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with using your phone. You can still get really good video quality, and if your content's good enough, if people want to watch you, they're going to have no problems watching on a phone. I watch a lot of vloggers who still use their phone. I couldn't really care less. You know, it's not about the actual video quality, it's about the quality of the video. So one more thing, you could also use a GoPro. I actually watch a person who does an hour vlog every week on his GoPro, and it still works really quite well. You know, you've still got that kind of fisheye effect, but when you're holding a GoPro pretty close, you actually got pretty good audio, surprisingly, so that's definitely something that could work as well. And one great thing about the GoPro is that it's very small, so when you're out in public, no one's going to really give a crap about it, because, you know, they're not going to be seeing you with a big Canon 80D or a, you know, some vloggers these days are using a Canon 1DX, and I'm like, what are you doing? It's so big, you're going to look like an idiot. So I don't know, I think a GoPro is actually a really good thing. You could probably get something like a GoPro Hero 4, a Hero 5, anything less, image quality is not going to be great. Probably look for a GoPro Hero 4. That would be a really happy medium, and I reckon you can pick that up pretty cheap secondhand. So Ray's got an interesting question here. They say, sometimes I get shy from my friend who's got a 2-digit Canon SLR, so that's going to be something like a 70D or an 80D. And I'm using a 4-digit DSLR, so I'm guessing that's going to be something like a 1300D. What do you think about that? Thanks, Chris. Greetings from Indonesia. Well, big hi to all of my Indonesia fans. I know I've got a lot of fans over there. Look, Ray, this is a really important thing, and I think that you need to kind of understand that no one gives a shit about your camera. And if they do, they're absolutely stupid, because it doesn't really matter in terms of what camera you're going to be using. It really matters about what kind of photos you're able to take. And I think I've seen some fantastic photos taken with the things like a Canon 1300D, 1200D, even really older cameras. They can still take fantastic photos, and a lot of people have this kind of snobbery kind of effect, which is, you know, having your nose up high and thinking, oh, but just because I've got a better camera, I can take better shots. And the truth is, it doesn't. You know, you might have a little bit more money and you might have spent a little bit more money, but I could definitely assure you that having a cheaper camera generally isn't going to make a massive difference in terms of your shots. A better photographer who's using a cheaper camera will always take much better shots than a lot of people who've got more expensive cameras and who really just stuff around too much with their cameras. So, Ray, really important for you to not worry about it. Just say, well, I take a better shot than you, and I don't really care. You spent more money, you're an idiot. So good luck, Ray. So Comment Master has said, hey Chris, which one is better for travel, prime or zoom lenses? Thanks, by the way. Now this is an interesting question because a few years ago, I think I would have had a slightly different answer. I was really big into prime lenses, and I really do like prime lenses. They're amazing. They're very sharp. They're lightweight. They have less kind of breakage because they don't have any moving parts. But probably these days, if you can get a good quality travel zoom lens, I'd probably recommend that. Simply for the fact that when you're traveling, you don't really want to be carrying around too many big lenses, or you don't want to have, like, you know, 5 different prime lenses from 18 millimeters all the way up to 100 millimeters when you get that in one lens. So for me, I'm probably going to recommend a good quality travel lens. It's always going to be a little bit easier to work around with. And these days, I'm trying to kind of minimize the amount of equipment that I take when I travel. I don't want to have a big backpack of camera stuff anymore. Firstly, it's kind of dangerous. People are going to be, you know, going after your camera gear, and you're always going to have to worry about it. And secondly, it kind of takes you out of the moment. So for me, I'm always going to kind of recommend taking, you know, maybe 1 or 2 lenses. If you want a prime lens, take something like a nifty 50. It's not expensive, so if you do lose it, it's okay, and you can get that nice kind of portrait shots if you want there. But for most other times, I think you can get really good quality shots. Maybe they're 80 to 90% as good as a prime lens would be, but then you can, you know, zoom in and out as much as you want. And if you're going to be doing any street photography, I think this is really important. You don't want to be up in the face of a lot of people too much, because I think it can be kind of rude, especially if they're not asking to have their photo taken. So if you can have a long lens, you know, maybe something like a 135, a 200 millimeter, it's going to be a little bit better, because then you can, you know, be a little bit more polite and take your photos from afar. So Keanu's saying, can you do a video looking at our Instagram photography account soon? Absolutely, I think that would be a really cool thing. If you guys would be interested in that, let me know by leaving a thumbs up in this video, and maybe leave a comment as well. And I'll see if I can do a quick video taking a look at a few of your Instagram pages, and maybe I'll be able to give it a few shout outs as well. So I'll definitely try and do that. So CJ in Madrid says, does SD cards, memory cards affect the quality of the video in uploading? Yeah, to a point. You definitely don't want to have a super slow SD card. SD cards are kind of measured in different classes, so you might have a class 6, a class 8, class 10. And that's essentially the speed at which they can process or write the information. So I know a lot of people, they'll get a new DSLR and they're like, oh, the buffer's stopped or the video stopped working. And that's generally because you don't have a fast enough SD card. And that's, it's just something that you kind of learn over the time. A lot of people will go out and buy a really cheap SD card because they're like, oh, you know, it's only $5 or it's only $10 and it's an off-brand kind of thing. I'd just generally recommend spending a little bit more money. You want class 10 or above these days. It's really important to do that. It's so cheap these days to get SD cards. In terms of brands, I'm going to recommend SanDisk pretty much straight out. P&Y do pretty good as well. Transcend to a point, but I would just highly recommend SanDisk. You can get their Ultra cards super cheap as well, so that's something I'd probably take a look at. So no, it's probably not going to affect the actual video quality of your videos, but it will affect whether it can actually keep on recording before, you know, it runs out of speed. So always try and get class 10 or above, guys, and that's the way to know that you're probably going to be good. Bit of a difference if you are going to be shooting 4K, you're going to need even faster cards. But again, if you're going to be shooting 4K, there's a whole lot of other things that it's going to open you up to. So JF7F Games says, how many cameras do you own and which one do you recommend for my first full frame camera for Canon? I probably own at the moment maybe 12 to 14 cameras, too many, way too many. But you know, I run a camera channel, so it's a little bit different. I'm always going to be reviewing cameras and also comparing cameras. I'm quite famous for my videos where I kind of, you know, say what the best camera is for travel or beginners or video or photography and things like that. So I need a few cameras to be able to physically show you guys which ones you can get. In terms of the best full frame camera, I mean, if it's your first camera, I'm not going to recommend a full frame camera pretty much for anyone because the lenses are really expensive. But if you do want to get a full frame camera, I'd take a look at something like a used Canon 6D, not the 6D Mark II that's come out recently. The old Canon 6D is going to be great, or even a Canon 5D Mark II. Again, these are cameras that might be 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, but people were taking amazing photos back then with a Canon 5D Mark II or even an original 5D, so you can take great photos as well. Don't believe the marketing hype. You don't need the absolute newest all the time. So there you go, guys. That was a Q&A, and I really enjoyed it this time. I think I should do these a little bit more often. Very relaxed, but I think I can kind of answer a lot of your questions, and that's a lot of fun. If you did make it this far, well done. And I'd love it if you leave a comment that says, made it. That would be cool, then I can see who exactly made it. So I'll try and do these videos a little bit more often. A big thank you to Storyblocks for sponsoring this video. I'm going to try and do a few more videos with them because they're awesome and helping out the channel. And I hope you guys have a fantastic day. I'm going to go have a coffee. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye.